Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Omnibus Show, the program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. This week's guests are Rick Markoff and Judge David Dreyer. And we are going to be talking today on the subject of friendship. Now, I could go into a long introduction of what you both have done, but your vitas are so large that we'll just add that into our discussion. Rick, you've been involved with leading the St. Vincent Medical Center Foundation in Toledo, and you were involved in leadership at the American Red Cross of Greater Indianapolis, the Simon Youth Foundation, the Central Indiana Education Alliance, and you were the founding president of the Damar Foundation. On top of that, you wrote a book called The $1 Million Moments, Amazing Professionals Who Helped Make Them Possible. What haven't you done?
I haven't been on this show before.
Well, you are now.
It's complete.
And of course, Judge, you've been the Marion County Superior Court judge, and you were attorney before that, and now you are a senior judge with Marion
Correct.
County. And so,
So I've seen your moments sometimes.
well, yes, this happens, doesn't it? But great to have you both
you.
with us
Thank you.
today. And well, let's get back into it. Now I know you've both been involved with Rotary. And was that where your friendship began?
Yeah, that's where we met. The Rotary is an international organization. Actually, it was founded in Chicago a long 100 years ago or more. And it was people back then in the early 20th century who wanted to get business people primarily aligned together in a club to do service and to be together, something which we don't do so much anymore. So there have been clubs all over the world now. The Indianapolis Downtown Club is one of the larger ones around here, and that's where we met back in the early 90s, I don't know.
Right, 1995.
Yeah, so it's been great.
And but your friendship developed during that. And what was the significant bond that really brought you two tighter together?
We happened to have breakfast together, David and I, the morning of 9/11. I think we got together about 8 o'clock on that particular date, and we were at a restaurant in downtown Indianapolis on Mass Avenue.
Yep.
And we were so engaged in our conversation that we were sort of oblivious to what was going on in the world on the television screens that were up above us. And it wasn't until David and I got back to our offices that we really found out what took place that morning.
Yeah, we really knew each other, I think, and had a lot in common anyway because of public service. I was a lawyer then, and but was very much involved in the community, and I had a history of being involved in the community and working in nonprofits and for low-income people and other things like that. So we had a lot in common as far as that went. So we knew each other at Rotary already. Because of that, we had similar interests, and a background. And as I recall, I was running for judge. I think I was running for re-election for judge, and it was early September, and we were going to have breakfast just, to be friendly, to get together anyway. But I also wanted to ask him about, he's a leader in the Jewish community. He would know people that I didn't know, although I did know many. And I was interested in just getting, when you run for judge, it's not like you're like a real big old political candidate. You really have to be very much of a grassroots, kind of under the radar with, just reaching people. So he was going to help me do that. And then we had this great breakfast and went back to our offices, and the world changed, as we all know, in front of our eyes. And so that was, our friendship was still there. I think, though, as I was remembering, a year later, 9/11 comes up, and we said, remember where we were a year ago? And it just kind of clicked that this is kind of a bond for some reason that we had that would help us deal with, the recovery from the horror of 9/11, but also, we relied on our friendship, I think, for both of us to deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, David, what has taken place some 23 years later is almost every single year since that particular time, David Dreyer and I find a way to get together,
Right.
usually on 9/11, and if we can't, for instance, this year, he has a trip out to the West Coast, and so we're getting together after this filming.
Right. So today will be our time.
Exactly.
Wow.
And
That's special. Thank you.
and we remember the importance of 9/11, and there are only certain people you can share these deep feelings with, and we have a mutual understanding, a mutual appreciation, a mutual respect for each other that allows us to look back on that particular date and to grow and to become better human beings because of
Right.
what took place on that particular date.
Yeah. And I don't know anybody else in my life who I have shared that with. I don't remember sitting down with somebody and
It's
going,
like
well,
life
what was it like to go through
experiences.
9/11, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, all of us are still, grieving, kind of numb, I think, even after all these years, at least in our generation, I think it's,
Yeah, I was in the office, and as I said when we talked before, that I thought it was a trailer for an upcoming movie. When I saw the planes going in, I thought, that's insane. You know what I mean? I've never seen that, where planes go into an office building, and especially in a very populated
Right.
city. That was very shocking to find out the reality of that, and it's sort of, it's like something you live with. I remember growing up with my father talking to me. Many fathers didn't talk about the war. That's actually were my bedtime stories. That was, I think, kind of his journal. He'd talk to you about anything. My father would. And so I'm about to go to sleep, and he'd tell me about, battles that he went through in Europe. And but nevertheless, I think, what you're saying is that these significant moments bring people together in a way that you don't in just sort of normal everyday life. The uniqueness of a marriage, uniqueness of being in service in the Army during a war or some kind of conflict that really brings people together in a way that is it's significant. You go through this life-changing moment together, and it changes things forever. Now, you're both Hoosiers, but you're from very different backgrounds, and in this season, I think that's a significant thing for us to hold to. Benjamin Harrison, I believe, was born in Ohio. You're originally an Ohio man, but
Correct.
you've put in enough time and you've done enough for our state to make you pretty much a born Hoosier. So you're a Midwesterner, but I think it's significant for you have different backgrounds, and I think that with people in this election season that we're coming up with, that it's good to know that there's something more than the things that divide us. The things that bring us together is very, very important.
Well, for me, with regard to David, I think that there are three things that stand out in my mind. Number one is the fact that David is a tremendous spokesperson. He is a very gifted speaker, and I appreciate that tremendously. The second thing is, and I learned this after 9/11, and David would have a party that he would give during the holiday season in downtown Indianapolis at I believe, the Union Hall.
Yeah, yeah.
And there would be hundreds and hundreds of people there from all walks of life, from the poorest of poor to the richest of rich, but they all had one thing in common, this tremendous appreciation for this gentleman who was an outstanding judge and a really quality human being. And I had great admiration for somebody who could bring all these people together. And the third thing that I think is extremely important, what I've learned most about the 9/11 experience with David is he is a great American. He holds our freedom, he holds our way of life, just tremendously important to him, and is not afraid to share that with me or with others. And I have a great appreciation for that, for a number of different reasons that I can go into, but those are three things that give me great admiration for David Dreyer.
Well, thank you, Rick. I actually was born in Ohio.
Were you actually born in Ohio? So
I was born in Cleveland. My father's from Indianapolis, and he was working there at the time. So
I won't say go home. No, we need you guys in Indiana. So
when I
we
was
need Ohio people.
When I was 3 years old, he moved back to Indianapolis. So I feel like, of course, I was raised here.
You've got those ties.
And everything. But yes, Rick reminds us of that. I had 19 years. I had this holiday party, and it kind of ran itself because I would just invite all these people, and it got to be really a thing that got to be a great thing of community, and all these different kinds of people, friends, and some of them related professionally or politically or personally in all those different ways. But the reason he says I'm a great speaker is because he was a long time head and actually kind of the founder of the iStar and Star Alliance, this great drug education program for youth here in the central Indiana. And every year I would be the MC for, 2 or 3 years for his kind of annual sort of award ceremony. And it was really a moving thing to see these kids, I call them kids, but middle school, high school students and their parents. It was very emotional at times, and it was very, very wonderful. So thanks for asking me to do that. So I don't know if I'm a great speaker or not, or a great person, like he says, but I do certainly appreciate our friendship. That's for sure.
And it's interesting also, David, that we aren't exactly what brought us together wasn't because we had so many commonalities. As David said, he's a city guy, and I'm a country guy. He is Catholic, and I am Jewish. He is staunch Notre Dame.
That's right.
Our older son graduated from Ohio State. My parents met at Ohio State, so we're Ohio State fans. So with all those differences, it's amazing how we've grown this bond together. And
the other thing is that, and I want them to hear, is you're different parties too.
Well, you're in Carmel, and I'm in Indianapolis.
Carmel,
Go ahead.
Indiana, yeah, no, that's different, yeah.
And he may be the only person since 1986, when they changed the laws about being able to deduct gifts to political candidates. He's the only person I've given money to all those years.
Well, thank you.
Because I believe in who he is as an individual.
Thanks.
That's friendship.
No, there is. It's true. One thing that bothers me and others, I think, is this sort of either-or mentality. That's why I like to call it, that we've grown into, where you got to be one thing or another. There's no in between. There's no range. There's no appreciation, and especially in politics, where you got to label things. You got to be, whatever, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, and there's nothing in between. We are, I guess, somewhat in different parties. I've voted for people in different parties. I ran as a judge 4 times as a Democrat, and so people would call me, I guess, an official Democrat, but I voted for Republicans, as I've said. But I have a lot of people who are good friends of mine, who are close to me, who I love, who are all kinds of political views, and it just doesn't, it's not a barrier to me. And I think that's not because of my credit. I think it's a generational thing, unfortunately. That, my father was a Goldwater Republican. My mother was a Kennedy liberal Democrat. And I don't like to use those kind of labels, or like liberal or conservative, but just to make it easier to understand. And so maybe it's because I grew up in that household. I don't know. But I do think that's an issue today that's unfortunate, that we have to be so separate, this either or.
Yeah.
Like you can't, anyway, it's hard to describe.
And because of that kind of attitude and the way he carries himself, X number of years ago, the Bar Association here gave him their Civility Award. And that's so important today, that it's important for us to recapture that ideal of civility. And together we can accomplish so much more if we're civil with each other than if we're always like this with each other.
Well, thanks, Rick. Now, there have to be pages of awards that Rick has here. They're so numerous I can't even mention
And
all.
yourself. I mean, yeah, with golly, you've got both of you have gotten awards. And but civility, our city councilman Jeff Worrell would be smiling right now if he sees this show, because that's one of his important subjects.
It's an award from the Bar Association, from lawyers to other lawyers and judges. And I was surprised to get it some years ago. And of all the things I've done or awards or whatever I've gotten, that may be the one that I've appreciated the most, because I value it so much. But also I was surprised. I didn't realize I was up for it.
Yeah.
They have to run for it, right?
Well, and being a judge too, being a non-judge, we're saying that is like, but that's quite a thing. That speaks very highly of your professionalism and your character, and as we were talking about earlier, Rick was observing of the whole wide group of people that you have as friends, and that friendship is a bigger bond than the differences. I mean, in times past, people, probably through most of time, people had their tribes and they closed ranks. But we live very much in a time where there's a French philosopher named Jean-François Lyotard who wrote a book about the postmodern condition. And what he's talking about with people was you have a lot of, in this era, there are all these different groups that you can be a part of. Not to dissociate, but just that's the way society is, like you belong to this group. And it's not to diminish it, but you're also involved with this and you're involved with these group of people. And having to navigate those relationships it requires a lot of maturity. And it is possible to navigate that. And you two have been testimony to that.
One of the things that occurs to me here listening to you is, when the Rotary Club started in the early 20th century, America and maybe the world was much more community-oriented, much more communal, much more outward, meaning people joined clubs.
Yes.
People got together. There wasn't TV. There wasn't a smartphone. There wasn't some of the things that seem to alienate our attention now or dominate us. And so people are more used to being together and appreciating or sharing and being tolerant and learning, from each other. And that's been whittled away, as we all know, as time goes on, so that now, people, there was no way a person who's coming out of college would think of joining a club. Oh, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure a lot of people do. But that should be a normal thing that everybody would be expected that they'd want to do, so that they could get out and meet other people and and have a well-rounded experience of people in their community. Then you wouldn't have so much as what I call this either-or thing, or this, some people call it like this silo.
Silo, that makes sense, yeah.
You don't have all these, everybody's this little silo. It's not just what happens to my neighbor affects me, or now we don't feel that way so much.
It's very interesting, because what brought us together today was 9/11.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Rotary here. And also, we're talking about dealing with adversity. And beyond the fact that why David and I get together each year, two other examples of taking adverse situations and making lemonade out of lemons are two things that come to mind with regard to Rotary. During the pandemic, or right before pandemic, the Rotary organizations of Central Indiana and Southern Indiana were going to have a joint conference together in April of 2020 out in Plainfield. And of course, COVID came along. And I had lined up 80 tremendous speakers to speak at this particular conference. And the conference had to be canceled. And what took place is a moment where we took those lemons from COVID, and I said, we have got to capture all the great ideas that these speakers would have. And instead of letting everything go and just saying we can't do anything because of COVID, we put together a publication called The Greatest Conference Never Held. And
That's a great title.
Which took all, the vast majority of these speakers and took a page document
Yes.
from what they were going to say from all their presentations, which now serves as a guideline for many Rotary clubs across the state of Indiana about what they can do with wonderful speakers and various opportunities. The second thing was then later on, once again with regard to COVID, the Rotary Club of Carmel, its branded event is called Carmel Fest, which is just huge in this particular community. And COVID struck down Carmel Fest that particular year. And what it did is it gave rise to an idea where I said, that can't be the only branded event that we have. We need to be doing other good things for people, which allowed us to create an event in its first year called Carmel Leadership Day, which has grown into Leadership Connection, where we take 160 to 175 high school juniors and seniors from both Carmel and the city of Indianapolis, in inner city Indianapolis, and bring them together with wonderful leaders not only in Carmel and Indianapolis and throughout central Indiana, to teach them about volunteerism, to allow them to mix and mingle with great business leaders, and to be able to draw them into the excitement of what it is to be a leader for the future of their communities. And that particular program has grown and grown. So our friendship has led, and Rotary has led, to some very positives out of what could just be completely negative events.
So you can see what makes Rick so good. He's always looking to build something.
Yeah.
He has a
very
great vision,
constructive.
and it's always been very inspirational to me.
Very, very civic-minded,
Yes.
and I think that's what will get us through.
Hope
And
so.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, thank you.
It was great having
Yes.
you today, David
Yes.
and Rick.
Thank you.
This was a great conversation, and I hope that our audience will watch this many times. We need to learn from these men. Well, today's show has been excellent conversation on friendship with Rick Markoff and Judge David Dreyer. And that's it for this episode of the Omnibus Show. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Hotel Carmichael. We are recording today from Feinstein's. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.